That day, there were 20. We saw them emerge from the bush, men, women, children, and old people. Everything they owned in the world was wrapped up in the bundles they had been carrying for miles. A few cherished belongings, a little food and water. Some days, as many as 100 have arrived. Up until now, 27,000 people left their country through this point, fleeing their homes and their fields to find peace in a land of asylum. They are African refugees, but like those uprooted in Europe and in other parts of the world, they only know one thing: suffering and exhaustion at the end of a tragic experience. This is a frontier zone, which explains the presence of soldiers. Only a few miles away in the Sudan, the hazards of history brought together under the same flag different ethnic groups living in the north and south, marked by differences in economic development and religion, factors which contribute to political frictions and tensions. This film is not to tell the origins of the conflict, only to show one of its tragic consequences. These thousands of refugees belong to an ethnic group called the Zande, who before decolonization lived in a kingdom now divided over 3 countries: the Sudan, the Congo, and the Central African Republic. Since 1964, many of those in the Sudan have sought asylum in the other 2 countries. The Central African Republic became independent in 1958. It is a country larger than France. It lies a few degrees north of the equator, its capital, Bangui. When thousands of refugees from the Sudan arrived, the government appealed to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And this organization, together with the League of Red Cross Societies, mounted a large-scale operation for the reception and resettlement of the refugees in the western part of the country. It is a relatively fertile region, but like many other parts of Africa, underdeveloped and sparsely populated. Mbaki, where the refugees are being settled, is a village of 750 people. Until the refugees arrived, they were the only inhabitants in an area of some 100 square miles.
On les appelait, hein.
Here in Mbaki, the refugees have to learn to live a new life. That is the theme of this film, which will follow them along the long path from exile to hope. This is the story of men and women who arrive stunned by misfortune and who, starting from scratch, will have to rebuild their existence. They will pass the first night in this hut, a temporary shelter. Tomorrow they will join the other refugees who arrived earlier and take part in the great adventure of building a new life. When the first refugees arrived, they were called together to discuss with the technical advisors in charge of the project how they wish to organize their lives.
Normal settlement in Africa, or did you want because we are in a new country, in a country where it is the bush, it is the forest. It is possible for us to have a modern agriculture if you want so. Then I am here to discuss with you what is your future living. Mr. Benjamin, and you explain them that it is possible to have the settlement like the...
Until then, in their own country, they had followed the age-old tradition of itinerant agriculture. Each year, they abandoned their land to move on elsewhere. The proposal was that they should build their huts in the middle of their land and rotate their crops.
Yes, they are willing, they are liking it.
The resettlement area, which has been set apart for the refugees around Mbaki, is 60 miles long and 10 miles wide. Each family is given a plot of land about 200 yards wide and nearly a mile long. The heads of each family themselves mark the boundaries between their plots.
Yani ondo guni kitan kumba bin toni gun kono ne kana banganda kumba bena garbe po barakono toni wadumo ni kumba bero toni kono ne ma ni garbe toni awa po on kidwa no do wulingwa ho mudangwa toni gungwar kono singba siringbe siringbe ko on mbo ko.
Today, this is still bush with elephant grass and wild trees. Tomorrow, the farmer will turn it into fertile land. Already the day after their arrival, all refugees of an age to work are given the seeds and tools they will need to grow their first crops. The traditional round straw hut is built in 2 or 3 days. It is surprisingly resistant to bad weather in spite of its frail appearance. All the land will not be cleared at once, some 5 acres the first year, which will be left to lie fallow the following year, while another 5 or 6 acres are planted. In this way, the refugees will learn the technique of rotation crops. The Zande have their own technique for getting rid of trees whose leaves would cast a shadow over the future crops. Fires are lit around the trunks of the trees, the leaves fall, and the sun will shine on the manioc. The introduction of more modern agricultural techniques will have to wait until later, for only through gradual learning will these people accept methods so different from those they used to know. For the moment, sowing is done with the hoe and the foot. What is important is that the next harvest will produce enough food for the people. But growing food is not the only urgent task. 300 miles of tracks and 60 bridges have to be built to make of Mbaki settlement a real community. This is done by the refugees themselves, who literally carve the new roads out of the bush with the aid of axes, machetes, and hoes.
Oui, ils écrasent un petit peu l'herbe. Hein. Ouvrir un petit peu l'herbe comme nous avons fait hier. Hein. À droite, Michel. Voilà, ici. C'est bon.
Through this work, some money has come to the people of Mbaki. Each laborer receives the equivalent of 20 United States dollar cents, or 1 shilling and 8 pence, for half a day's work, a double ration of food, and a special allowance of clothing every month. And this is considered a good wage by local standards. Each month, trucks bring building materials, equipment, and food for the over 16,000 people in the settlement, along the nearly 1,000-mile track from Bangui to Mbaki, a journey that takes between 7 and 10 days of cautious and difficult driving over the track that leads from the capital to the frontier. The refugees have been grouped in villages, each under the authority of a traditional chief. In every village there is a distribution of food each month, and this will continue until sufficient crops are produced to feed everyone. So far, the World Food Programme of the United Nations has provided over 2,000 tons of food, oil, cereals, powdered milk, and salt. The rations are sufficient, but there is no meat. The result is a severe lack of protein in the diet. What this means, we saw when an old elephant who had been causing havoc with the crops was shot, and a whole village gathered for their share of the meat. It looks savage, but remember, hunger all over the world has an ugly face. Growing food is the main concern. A vast experimental garden has been laid out to test which varieties of seeds and plants will grow best in this part of Africa. A great deal of thought has also been given to the fact that the men and women who work here on their plots will need vitamins. 8,000 lemon and orange trees have been planted so that each family will in time have fresh fruit. Rabbits and poultry are being bred. To improve the strain of chickens, A swap system is used, one cock from a superior breed against 2 hens. But in Africa, a deal, however small, is never concluded without a lot of talk. Regularly, the High Commissioner's representative brings together the chiefs.
If we choose tobacco, if we choose cattle, we don't know exactly which one pays much money until we see the price of it, and then we shall classify that, yes, this one here, it is what can bring money.
There are decisions to be taken. The High Commissioner's office has invested $3 million in this undertaking. For the moment, the main objective has been to ensure survival. But beyond that, there is a development plan for the entire region, which will encompass the local population as well as refugees. Agriculture, handicrafts, and trade are to be promoted. Along with food, cash crops such as pepper, tobacco, silk, and sugarcane must be grown.
To start it, it must have an experiment. You can start
In the
it.
foreground among the leaders is the last descendant of the Zande kings, Chief Renzi.
Yeah, sure.
14 Europeans work in the center. A doctor, 2 nurses, 3 delegates of the League of Red Cross Societies, 3 Dominican sisters, and 5 technicians from the organization entrusted with the execution of the project. Among these is Jacques Roux, an architect. He's finishing the plans for the new hospital in consultation with a doctor, a Belgian Red Cross volunteer.
Et le camion importé depuis 10-12 jours de Bangui n'est pas arrivé. Alors, vous savez...
But there are problems caused by the long distance separating Mbaki from Bangui. One wing is almost ready. 2 more are to be built. A maternity ward and a special wing for the tuberculous.
Vous voudriez que les malades se mélangent?
Ah oui, 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 sauf alors en faire une cuisine spéciale pour les tuberculeux, mais ça c'est par après si le projet est accepté.
Ça va bien. Très bien. Still injections, huh?
The health problems in Mbaki, as in other parts of Africa, are a result of poverty, a primitive way of life, and malnutrition. While waiting for the new hospital to open, 3 nurses, a missionary midwife, and a doctor have to serve the whole community, which includes more than 300 lepers. Not only the diseases themselves must be fought, but also ignorance and fear, and the means are limited.
They see. Hmm? Can you lift your leg?
Yes, now.
Let him lift his leg a bit.
Can lift up your leg. Mutumangan dulu tuan.
A small village has been built for the lepers. Their relatives are living nearby. They form a pathetic community, visited each day by the doctor and by the missionary sister. Fortunately, no new cases of leprosy have been traced in Mbaki. But notwithstanding all efforts, this particular day, someone had died. This poor monument, this tomb on the land, strangely enough, is a sign that the Zande are settling. For where the dead lie buried, the land is blessed for the living, says the Zande dictum. Already, a new life is finding expression in the community activities, the meetings in the marketplace, and in the songs of the traditional bards who every Sunday tell of the happenings of the week. But the promise of Mbaki is above all with the children.
Now, you people here, you are called Diko. Do you understand?
Yeah.
You are called Diko, and you here, you are called Simbra. Do you understand? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Bambia Bambia Naro. Bambia Bambia Naro. Bambia Bambia Naro. Bambia Arge.
There are 720 pupils in 10 primary schools in Mbaki. Secondary education will come soon. These refugee children were taught English when they were in the Sudan. Today, they have to learn French. The teachers, themselves refugees, had to learn this new language. They have not done too badly.
Maintenant, c'est fini. Maintenant. Hein? Glace, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est un livre. Maintenant? Hein? Où est le livre? Tu connais? Où est le livre? Toi? Où est le livre?
Le livre est sur la tête du maître.
Toi, où est le livre?
Le livre est sur la tête
Où est le livre, toi?
Le livre est sur la tête
Où est le livre? Où est le livre?
Le livre
est sur la tête du maître.
Est sur la tête du maître.
Toi, où est le maître? Où est le livre maintenant? Où est le livre? Où est le livre maintenant? Où est le livre? Toi, où est le livre?
Le livre est sur la tête
Toi, bien, toi, où est le livre? Le livre est...
Le livre est...
Le livre est sur la tête de Perina.
And so, the Zande have come to Mbaki, where they have found peace and security and a promise for the future. thanks to the help they receive from a compassionate world and to the courage with which all of them, young and old, undertake the hard task of building a new life.